welcome back to my channel. Hopefully my phone doesn't fall over because it's literally balanced up on something. Basically I want to do a video on a facet of narcissistic recovery, individuation and all that, but specifically codependency, which I have spoken about in the past, but it can be something that we're trained into in toxic family dynamics and other toxic relationships, where codependency is created because you have this like relationship which is where you get a toxic what you need in a toxic way from a person rather than give it to yourself. And it's not just a case of not giving yourself what you need and meeting your own needs, but it's also a case of you become, as I say, codependent to the point where they enjoy you not being able to meet your own needs and will do things to cause problems for you and kind of try and control you in sort of a psychological way, in terms of like they might beat you down so your self-esteem is low, so then you might feel unable to make other relationships and come crawling back to them and then give them the validation they need so then they can repeat the cycle again. So it can keep this level of codependency which goes on. Usually codependency comes from that dynamic within caregiving, or lack of it, shall I say. So yeah, the causes for it, I'll just say quickly, it can be overprotective or underprotective, which creates overcompensation within the child, which makes you resistant to guidance and support. Or you can have helicopter parenting, where you basically are sort of inhibited from the ability to be able to actually learn these skills for yourself, or a mixture of the two. In terms of how this can look as well in adult relationships, obviously differs for different people, and it can, like, I'm not really sure, from children to adulthood I think it's the same. But difficulty articulating emotion is the first one, and the way I've dealt with this is to use an emotional thesaurus and also consider polarities in emotions as well. So emotional thesaurus is actually a great idea for anyone that's struggling with identifying emotion, because you obviously write in an emotion and then you get like 20 more next to it which look the same, but they do give you a variety of feelings that you might not be able to identify, especially if you haven't learned how to identify them. Also, yeah, so polarities, it can help with emotional regulation, and healing from emotional dysregulation, and also finding more positive emotion. For example, if you feel sad and you just haven't learned enough ways to feel happy in that moment, it can give you a good coping strategy to identify an emotion, aka sadness, and say, I want to feel happy. It creates that automatic mind shift when you seek out something happy, because your mind will go towards what it's thinking about, if that makes sense. If you search out actively something that gives you the opposite emotion, it does obviously shift your mindset. In terms of other things that it can show in adulthood, people pleasing, being a people pleaser. I feel like I've literally always thought this, but I think it more shows up for me not so much as people pleasing. I think sometimes it's cognitive dissonance in terms of people pleasing, but it often shows up for me in terms of valuing other people's opinion over mine. And even when I look at past journal things and stuff, like, you know, it can be easy to actually, even when you read it back, it doesn't sound healthy, you know, and that's not something to be ashamed of. But even when I've read my past journal entries and stuff, it's not healthy, like the way, like, you know, even when I read it back and stuff, I know myself it's not healthy, but it does take time to break that cognitive dissonance, and there's no point judging yourself for having an unhealthy mindset that you've been conditioned with your whole life. You know, obviously on a logical level I can sort of like conduct myself as an adult would and not sort of overstep boundaries and stuff, but on a subconscious level there is subconscious programming which obviously has led me towards toxic relationships as an adult and stuff. So yeah, having blind loyalty is another thing. In terms of, you can have like blind spots when you have childhood trauma. You can often have blind spots in terms of your actual ability to see the world and the positive, possible negative things in it. Especially if you like still have like an ongoing relationship with a toxic person, which is conditioned in your mind. You'll obviously attract someone similar because obviously that's what you're used to and that's what you've already got going on. That's what your life is at the moment, and your life circumstances incorporates that person. So yeah, but having this blind loyalty idea, it does come from this level of cognitive dissonance, not really understanding or being conscious or having cognitive dissonance in a relationship to actually not recognize, not only not recognize, but yeah, but like feel you might have this level of safe porting or prolonged past safe porting. Safe porting is where someone kind of like is like, I'm your caregiver, so you have to give me this, this, and this, or we have to have a relationship, or I am your, you know, relationship partner, so you have to give me this, this, and this, or I've done good things for you, or I've been a friend to you in the past and done this for you. We need to be in this sort of a conversation and you need to listen to my problems and blah blah blah. You're not obligated to do anything for anyone. It is all of your choice. Obviously I'm not talking about, I mean, you're not. Life circumstances bring about situations, but there's no reason to be violated in that sort of a way. Even in work situations, you come across toxic people, and even there, you have to just navigate them the best way you can. I've done many videos on these. I think we all do. But yeah, so yeah, blind loyalty. I think it does come with time, and I was going to talk about healing later, but it's obviously ongoing within all of this stuff. In terms of identifying, it does take time for even your mind, if it's been traumatized, to actually bring up the issues that are causing you problems, and that's okay, and it means that you can make patience for yourself. You know, it's okay not to be okay. I'm gonna just quote Demi Lovato and be like the cringiest person ever, but it is. And it's like, everyone's not okay at times. Narcissists are certainly not okay, probably most of the time, but it's a case of, not that they'll ever admit that, but it's a case of, it's okay not to be okay. Like, we are all on a process of healing and stuff, and if this is something you're dealing with, then it's what it is. So blind loyalty, yeah, I've just mentioned that. Guilt for things that are not your fault. This comes from a level of revocation of relief. It comes from a level of lack of accountability within a toxic person, especially narcissists, psychopaths, all that sort of stuff, sociopaths and that. They won't, sociopaths are narcissists as well. You don't get a non-narcissistic sociopath. They will where was I? Yeah, they will not take responsibility for their actions, and this leaves you with a sense of guilt for things that you've done that have been not your fault, and potentially unprovoked in situations. Psychopaths, they have this inevitable need to have stimulation, so they're ongoing. If allowed, I always think narcissists will continue abusing you as long as they can, as long as they feel like you are accepting that behaviour, because they are just vampires, basically. Narcissistic vampires, like energy suckers. They will take whatever they can get. But I do think healing from narcissistic abuse and stuff, it does come along with, obviously, codependency. It's not every single part of it, but narcissistic abuse can have a massive impact, as I said, on because obviously toxic parents and stuff, likely narcissistic. It does bring this level of self-sufficiency and resilience that can really be helpful in terms of actually moving forward in your life without the toxic person, and obviously being autonomous and independent, which is kind of what you want. So sacrificing yourself for others, and having poor boundaries, they're slightly different. So just boundaries, obviously easy. concept to think about. I have had a couple of videos on boundaries. Boundaries obviously vary for each person. From my experience, cutting toxic people out in all extents is the best way forward, because they can't have a healthy relationship due to their very nature of being toxic. If there's one healthy person, one toxic person, you're going to have a toxic relationship because the toxic person will make it toxic. It's not your fault. It's about healing from toxic relationships of the past. That's my strategy moving forward in terms of having to ongoingly deal with any sort of toxic person in passing, because I will not be having romantic relationships with toxic people, or like personal relationships, sorry, with toxic people, and if needed, and most likely setting those boundaries with toxic people that you are trying to distance from, especially if they won't leave you alone. Like, it's very normal within toxic behaviour, and sort of experienced in my life a few times, that you can kind of hint or kind of move away from them and they'll just kind of try and suck you back in like a vampire does. You have to set boundaries with them and just be like, I'm like, if you go no contact, it's just saying, I'm going to change my number, do not contact me, I do not wish to have a conversation or a relationship with you. And that can be point blank, and once you've said that, that's kind of your task done, and it's only about following through with that, because what are they going to do if you don't contact them and you don't see them? They can sit in their house all day every day thinking about you. That's kind of their own decision, but there's not a lot else they can do. And if they start harassing you, there's legal action that can be taken. I have to delete a video. So yes, I was talking about boundaries. Yeah, so obviously this is different for different people. I understand complexities can come into it, such as work, family obligations, blah blah, cultural problems. But in terms of culture, I will mention, in my opinion, I know it's not for me to obviously dictate what anyone else does in terms of cultural issues, but being part like European or whatever through my bloodline, and obviously part like Irish and stuff, culturally, narcissism is narcissism in my opinion. There's not, like, obviously culture does incorporate narcissism sometimes into its cultural norms, in terms of, you know, certain religions and stuff. I'm not saying like religion is one, it's kind of separate. It is separate. I wouldn't say I mean, let's not talk about religion now, but religious stuff can have a bit of a connotations as well. So especially it's more a case of like if you have like narcissistic religious leaders that kind of are being overly dictative, or, you know, manipulative or abusive or whatever. Obviously that's not good, and that will happen workplaces, other places as well. But yeah, culturally, this can be this sense of, like, again, blind loyalty, which is kind of common in certain cultures, of, like, you know, respecting leaders blindly and not questioning, and finding it disrespectful to kind of speak up if there has been any issues or problems, in fear of sort of exposing people, that sort of taboo level within cultures. But equally, I do feel that toxicity is toxicity generally, from my experience within cultures. So sacrificing yourself for others is the next one. Again, it's not a healthy thing, obviously, kind of the nature of why I'm making this video. And I do find that I do it even now, but again, it's so important not to blame yourself if it's been something that you've been, like, conditioned with, or conditioned to do over long periods, because obviously that's how your mind is worked. And to be honest, the more I process toxic abuse that I've experienced in the past, the more I see that at that time it was adaptive, and it was protective of my experience at that time. For example, if I was forced to live with a toxic person, that behaviour kept me from being further abused, because that would happen, you know, and it meant that I didn't have to, you know, leave my house of origin and end up on the street, and I was able to continue being educated and, you know, with my friends and stuff. It was an adaptive behaviour at that time, but as an adult, and I've lived away from my family of origin for 5 years, and you just cut them off. But it's a case of, when it comes to actually being away from your family of origin and living in your own house, you don't have to obviously do that behaviour. And even if you feel like you've somehow overcome that level, there can be a sense of subconscious programming still existent in your lifestyle, which can be helpful to process. So yeah, the next thing, so actually I think I was talking about sacrificing yourself for others. I'm just wondering if I have anything else to say about that. It can just come from a sense of, again, cognitive dissonance in terms of, or like long-term exposure to people which condition you to do this. It's the more I, as I said in the past, learn about toxic behaviour and toxic experiences and stuff, the more it kind of makes sense in my mind as a total image, like a puzzle piece that kind of fits together in terms of a jigsaw or whatever. Negative, toxic people, toxic parents, godlike parents will actually make this sense of they don't want you to individuate, basically. So you will, and narcissists in general will kind of consistently break you down in order to get you to comply to their way of thinking. I did a video recently on how this happens, and there's various videos I have that talk about this. So you will inevitably sacrifice yourself for others if you've been narcissistically abused, because of the way that they condition you. And this can lead to a sense of inability to have the energy left for looking after yourself. And this can create a hypercritical superego. Superego is kind of like your inner parent, and you have an idea in your id, and whether you want to do it in your ego, and then you have your superego somewhere in between, and it can really mess up your superego if you have this sense of ongoing abuse, where obviously you get a toxic person or toxic people that kind of project all of their insecurities on you, which are kind of it's just ongoing negative energy without relent, and it's not fair, as in like the actual stuff, it doesn't make sense, it's not logistically true. But it can create a lot of stress and confusion, and then create this sort of critical inner parent. If you do have this sense of like self-blame because they won't take responsibility for yourself, and this chronically sort of stressed out superego that is kind of in this state of like confusion and stress because they kind of trying to monitor trying to sort of create their own lives, but are consistently being, it might have been programmed in childhood to actually invalidate yourself, to validate the parent, which is very normal and seen in a lot of toxic parenting, parenting from toxic people. It's not toxic parenting because it's a two-way experience, and the child sort of did anything wrong. It's a case of you were parented by a toxic person, so it was a toxic relationship. Okay, as I said, you get one toxic person, one healthy person, it becomes a toxic relationship because the toxic person is making it toxic. That's not your fault as a healthy person. Validation needed, rather than giving it to yourself, getting it from another person or seeking it from another person, to actually become validated within yourself and actually sort of feel like you're doing something for yourself that is correct, because it got again along this same sense of hypercritical superego, you kind of need this, you are conditioned to gain approval from a toxic parent, or toxic relationship ongoing. If you have a toxic parent, it's often that you can get into toxic relationships in all aspects that kind of mirror that relationship that you had with a parent, and valuing the approval of those people over yourself, over your own, but also gaining validation, looking for validation to do things even as simple as feeling certain emotions or basic things like relaxation, comfort, the more I do, more I connect to source and God and stuff. It's like I deeply believe that God gives us our peace and our comfort, our strength, our joy, our safety, our protection. But godlike parents that genuinely believe that they are sort of godlike, I believe it's a sense of blaspheme. But they act and believe they're, worthy enough, godlike to abuse other people. They have this godlike sense, and it can actually trick you and condition you and sort of brainwash you into believing like they're obviously a toxic person's opinion is not going to be the opinion of you. Like, it's not, I believe we get our image through God. Obviously another person's opinion of you isn't your sole, essence. Your essence is very diverse, and a toxic person should not be could take over your entire image of yourself and even your way of life, your image of your life. So yeah, and it's even things, like basic things that you kind of seek through toxic people, because even and it's just what it is, and it will make sense on a logical level if you actually look at it. In terms of narcissism and toxic people, they do, because they cannot have a range of emotion, they have their own ranges of emotion, they need you to comply and support their emotion, otherwise they feel out of control. So if you show an emotion, they will invalidate it and rage potentially, or just do something to bring the attention back to them, or just irritate, so you kind of get distracted, depending on what kind of level of narcissism you're dealing with. That kind of sucks you back to their take on life and their mindset rather than yours, and then they try and condition you, which as an adult it's much easier to discern this behaviour, but as a child you can't actually do this as easily. So that's why you do become messed up from these people. So in terms of, this obviously can affect your, so in terms of, like basic things, just sort of like waiting on that approval to actually get before you actually feel comfortable to actually feel an emotion, which, as I said, it's so normal, and you've been conditioned that way to feel that way by toxic people, because they don't want you to have autonomy. They want you to come to them before it being able to relax. That is the toxic traits that they have. It's exactly what they do, because they need that control and they need that sort of compliance. They need the shame that is evoked through you for not being self-sufficient, because it's not a level of self-sufficiency really, because you're not, like, obviously doing things for yourself that you've been conditioned out of doing. So you're really just living a normal person's life, but you can feel this sense of insufficiency and shame from not obviously living the life that you want if you are somehow disabled in some way from doing this stuff, or less sort of able to validate yourself than you would like. And it's just practice and neuro pathways with that sort of thing, to be able to actually do that, and just time and sort of processing what you're actually wired to be doing, and obviously time just to let your body, because you can over process, and obviously somatic healing is something that I like to do. And also, as I said, this can affect your self-esteem. I'm going to try and get this last bit out before my camera stops. This can affect your self-esteem, and it's just so important to, like, trust your intuition, because your intuition doesn't lie. People can say stuff all the time which is toxic, which sounds healthy, but it doesn't line up to their actions. And it's about sort of like following your intuition, and you do, I think, over time, especially when you unintegrate things that have been kind of pushed on you, because toxic people, they don't see your actual genuine personality. They see a projection of their insecurities. That is literally all they see. They're not insightful on an emotional sense. or they're not intuitive like that in terms of other people. They don't really, or if they do see the goodness in you, they hide it from themselves because it affects their own self-esteem. So when this happens, it's really sort of obvious to the person that's experiencing it, once you know this fact, that they actually have no idea what you're like as a person. They don't care to know you as a person. They don't have the ability to connect with you, so why would they get to know you if they can't connect with you, because they only see their own emotion. The last thing they want is for you to be autonomous, because they would have no purpose then being toxic, because that's the whole point. They want to toxically dominate the situation. That's kind of their goal. And creates all bad chaos, neglect, and all that stuff. Anyway, it's a really sad truth, but that's kind of what toxic people do. And you can have integrated, or you can't integrate a false part of yourself, but you can be mentalizing the abuse that you've experienced and the projections that you've experienced from toxic people. And once you unintegrate or try to discern what's actually not you and what's a toxic projection, like, that can be really helpful for building self-esteem and confidence and stuff, and also self-respect in terms of, it's not self-respect, I think self-respect more comes from a sense of compassion from struggling. My camera's about to stop, but in terms of referring to yourself, knowing that validation has to come from yourself, because no one's there to be your like consistent validator. Like, obviously friends are great, relationships that are healthy are amazing for validation and stuff, but in terms of actually healing, like, they're only going to be able to do so much. You're going to have to eventually come to that point where you can heal yourself as well. Thanks for listening.